Steven Soderbergh is back with Black Bag, a sleek and stylish spy thriller, starring Micheal Fassbender, Cate Blanchett, Pierce Brosnan, and Naomi Harris. The film follows Fassbender, a spy George, married to Blanchett's Catherine, who is suspected of stealing sensitive documents. Fassbender must investigate his wife and determine if she is who he thinks she is. Budget for this film sits at around $50 million, a rare B-movie budget, but the film is not expected to recoup this at the box office, having made just $12 million so far. We may appreciate Soderbergh's small-scale vision, but questions remain about how smart it was to give this size budget to a film with no major pull of director or actor. Despite these off-screen questions, on-screen, the film has been received very well. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film sits at 97% with critics and 71% with fans. So with that being said, where do I sit with this? I don't think this is going to be a very long video, partly because I don't think that Black Bag is intended to be hyper-analyzed. It's not a movie that, you're going into thinking, oh, what's the theme here? It is a slick, stylish, hour and a half, get in, get out spy thriller, and it deserves to be talked about because it is good enough to be talked about, but it's not out of this world. And I don't think Steven Soderbergh is attempting to make a film that is out of this world. He's not making something that is going to be an Oscar contender, not going to get nominations. Maybe he'll get one or two for a couple of the acting performances, but it's not going to blow people away with how it's being made, its directing, its writing, its casting, its acting, all of that. But there are interesting facets here that I think we can pull out. And, one of the ones that I'm particularly interested in that I will talk about to the end of the video is the resurgence of Fassbender since he took that break in 2020 from acting and since he returned in 2023. I think it's interesting to look at the last 3 or 4 movies that he chose before he left acting and how he seemingly changed since he's come back into the industry. But before we get into that, let's start first off with Soderbergh himself. Let's start with his directing, and then let's go into the writing, and then the casting, and then finally, we'll discuss Fassbender in this film himself. So, I think what's most interesting to me is that Steven Soderbergh in this film, his directing style really comes through as being very simplistic. It's focused on style over substance. He's not attempting to convey an overwhelming message about morality, faith, religion. He's not talking about war and peace and all that stuff. This is just a fun, slick spy thriller. And he's not attempting to wow you with his directing techniques or his directorial techniques. He's just attempting to go, here's a spy thriller, enjoy yourself, bye. And that's it. And because of that style of directing, it really allows a lot of room for the actors to act. It gives actors like Cate Blanchett, Isabela, and most importantly, Micheal Fassbender, alongside others like Tom Burke, Naomi Harris, and Rege, John Page, I believe his name is. I might be getting that wrong. It is French. It gives these performers space to breathe. It gives them space to really work with the script, and because the script itself is also quite simplistic, it gives them room to put their spin on the characters and say, okay, well, this is a basic spy thriller. What do you think this character is? Make this character different in a way, make this character different from your other spy thrillers. Pierce Brosnan, you've done a lot of spy work, obviously because of James Bond, and even stuff after that, he's done things like The Foreigner. Make your character different, and in some sense, I'm not sure if they succeed, but we'll come again onto that later. But I think it's so interesting to me that Soderbergh is interested in these types of films because it represents a market. It represents a very, very well-known director in the industry who is going, I reject big Hollywood budgets and big Hollywood productions entirely. I am going to focus on doing my own stuff, and I am going to focus on small markets, small margins, and I will find an audience there. And it's not that every film he makes is a spy thriller. In fact, he is consistently changing what he does. So whether it's 10 years ago doing Behind the Candelabra, whether it's 2-3 years ago doing the final Magic Mike movie, whether it's last year doing Presents, whether it's this year doing Black Bag, he is consistently on the ball, but consistently changing what he's doing, and he is attempting to reach as many people as possible. And then there is also the added benefit of this movie, which is that this film is not attempting to be everything in this world is serious. There is a lot of humor in this film, and again, that comes down to a lot of the performances in this movie. But I think we have to give a lot of credit to Soderbergh in that regard, in terms of he doesn't take himself so seriously. He isn't attempting to be this premier auteuristic director. He is going, well, film is here to be enjoyed, so let's enjoy ourselves. And I really appreciate that. You know, we can sit here and analyze our Dunes, our Enoras, Poor Things, The Substance, all these, and we might love those films, and I do love all those films, but there is space to be made for well-known, good, established directors who are very well respected in their craft, who can just also make fun hour-and-a-half films. It doesn't need to be expansive. It doesn't need to be far-reaching, full of themes. And I really appreciate that about Steven Soderbergh. I really appreciate that about this film. And I appreciate that he has a stellar Hollywood cast in this film, but isn't attempting to go, no, look at me, look at what I'm doing behind the camera. And I think that that is so interesting to me, and that is so refreshing when a lot of films now, it feels like the big pull or the biggest performer is what is behind the camera rather than in front of the camera. And I'm very impressed with Soderbergh's work in this film for that reason, in terms of it is just simplistic. It is pointing the camera at an actor and then just going, act. You're the main performer here. You're the most well-known guy. Let's see what you've got. So then we come on to the writing, and the writer of this movie is David Cope, who is obviously comes from, you know, Indiana Jones, Panic Room, Mission Impossible. He is an incredibly well-respected writer who has 30 years of experience in this industry. And again, this is another thing to me where I find it very interesting that this premier writer, this premier director has signed on to do this project, where they know that this isn't going to be a heavy hitter. They understand that this is an independent, small-scale movie, and yet they've still gone, well, yeah, but we're interested enough in this idea, in this project, that we're going to do it anyways. And I find that so refreshing, because it doesn't have a $200 million budget and a $150 million marketing budget for these production staff to sign on. It is just a small-scale project that they're very interested in and that they want to see. And as Soderbergh said in his interviews beforehand, you know, we don't make grown-up films anymore. And this is a film for grown-ups that respects its audience but isn't attempting to moralize at its audience. And the work of David Cope here is very interesting to me, because you don't see a lot of spy thrillers that focus so heavily on its comedic side. There is a lot of scenes in this movie where it is outright, I would say, even making fun of its characters. It's making fun of the concept of spycraft. And, you know, it is saying it's not as serious as we all claim it to be, or as the movies claim it to be. It is actually, in some sense, a game that they're all partaking in, and they all are aware that they're spying on each other, and in some sense, that deserves to be satirized. Now, I will say that I also think that in the movie's more serious moments, it becomes fairly wordy. It becomes very elaborate, and sometimes I don't think that they explain what they're talking about very well. I think the plans that they discuss at the end of the movie, and that's a slight spoiler, I will say, I'll have to put a spoiler warning on this now. I think the plans that they talk about are very elaborate, And once you sit down and think about it for 5-10 minutes after the film, you sort of go, okay, I get that now. But I'm not sure that the movie exactly lays it out from point A to point B and then in plan to point A to point B again and goes, okay, here's them separate and then here's how they figure together, because this is two plans that are working against each other. And it doesn't really explain them well enough for me personally, and I found that a bit frustrating considering how simplistic of a movie that this is. With a movie that's as simplistic as this, I expect the writing to be simplistic enough that I understand it and there isn't confusing moments. But that is just a light sort of criticism. It's not a major criticism for me. Again, there isn't a lot of heavy dialogue in this movie because the movie is quite short. The movie attempts to keep the dialogue as simplistic as possible so you understand what is going on. A lot of the time, there's just maybe one or two scenes where you see that, and I became aware of it, and I was like, that's a bit annoying. There is also the fact that the film's best character actually isn't Cate Blanchett's character. It is Micheal Fassbender's character. It is Maria Isabela's character, who at the end of the movie is sort of just sidelined. They sort of are just like, oh, she's not involved in any of this. She was sort of just a bystander. And I found that a bit harsh, in my opinion, because I actually think she probably gives the best performance in the film. And I would have liked for her character to be given a bit more of a closed off ending in terms of going, she wasn't just here, she was actively involved in this. And because the majority of the comedy or the comedic relief comes from her, it sort of puts her character down and it puts Maria Isabela down in a sense, because it goes, oh, well, you've outlived your usefulness now. You're given the end scene, but we're not actually going to give you like time or like involvement in the plot writ large. You're sort of just here because we would feel weird if you weren't here because you've been in the majority of the scenes before this. And that's a bit harsh to me. I found that to be, it's not disrespectful because it's a film at the end of the day. I that would be too harsh to criticize it for being disrespectful. But it is a bit like, okay, come on, guys. Like, she gave a stellar performance in this film. I think she deserves a bit more respect in that regard. And I found that to be a bit annoying, in my opinion. But she holds her own. And this is probably this is the first film that I've seen her in, and I was quite impressed. So I will now be going back and checking other stuff. She did play Amy Winehouse in that Back to Black biopic last year, which I heard was quite poor. So I don't know whether or not I should check that out. If I should just go further back and find something else that is more highly rated. I'm not sure what else she's been in, to be honest. But, in a cast of heavy hitters, like well-known Hollywood guys, Naomi Harris, Micheal Fassbender, Cate Blanchett, even Tom Burke is very well known for his Come On Strike TV show here in the UK. Rege John Page, he's very well known for the Bridgerton season 1 adaptation that he was in. For her to hold her own and for me to really come away from the film going, no, she's probably the best part of this. She's really funny. She's entertaining. She steals every scene that she's in. She sells the lines that she's given. She's given a comedic line about her anal sphincter, and she sells it very well. She makes her character believable in this world where everyone is self-serious. Micheal Fassbender plays the straight guy, or the straight man, I should say. He doesn't find things funny in this world, and she is there to alleviate the situation. She is there to go, no, I reject your sort of self-seriousness in its entirety. I believe that this is all a joke, and that is how we should treat it. And she has a line where she says, when all of us do, or all of us lie all the time, how do you ever know who you are? And she knows who she is because she consistently laughs and she consistently jokes around when she shouldn't. And I found that to be a very interesting character trait, and I think she plays it very well. I feel like we've now just veered into the cast element of this video. So let's just stick in that. I think the cast is very good. Like I say, it's mainly Hollywood heavy hitters. But again, even those Hollywood heavy hitters understand that this is a small, independent, small budget, hour and a half film. It's not going to be a James Bond film, which Naomi Harris obviously has experience with. James Bond, so does Pierce Brosnan. They understand that they're not going for the an Oscar nominated movie for 2025. They understand that this is a small budget film that they're working in, and they all sort of respect the material. They all sort of act as well as they can with the material that they're given, but they're not attempting to overact. They're not, having a Sophie's Choice moment where they go like, "Oh, this is my scene. I'm going to steal it." Even though I've just said Maria Isabela does steal a lot of scenes that she's in, that is just sort of because she's given a lot of comedic moments and she is very good in those comedic moments. I will say that I feel like the cast, at some points, particularly the dinner scenes at the start of the movie and then at the end of the movie, it can feel a bit bloated, but surprisingly, they manage that very well, given that they have to find enough time in this hour and a half movie for 6 or 7 characters. I never at any point was like, okay, well, that character's kind of just like being written off halfway through the film. The only time that happens, as I said earlier, was when Maria Isabela is sort of just written off and as comedic relief at the end of the movie. But it doesn't really do that throughout the movie. It never really feels too bloated. That moment at the end of the film when she's written off is more about her character being written off as just comedic relief rather than being like, oh, this cast is too bloated. And again, I was upset, or not upset, but I was sort of like, oh, well, that's a bit harsh on her performance that she's been written off in that way. But they still manage to manage the entire cast and all of the characters very well in this movie, and I thought that was very well done. And again, that goes back to Soderbergh's experience in this industry for as long as he's been in this. What is it now? 40 years. He started in '89 with Sex, Lies, and Videotapes. So altogether, I feel like I feel like the writer, the director, and the cast all came together in this film and understood what their mission was. They weren't out to make a massive Hollywood hitter, even though they were all Hollywood hitters, or at least industry hitters, because Soderbergh isn't really a Hollywood director. He's an independent director who's dabbled with Hollywood a bit. They all buy into this vision of this film that they have, and they accept it. And I found that to be very enjoyable, in my opinion. I think it is very charming that they all saw something in this film and decided, yeah, I want to work on that. That's very interesting to me, and it's charming, and it really sells the movie in some aspect to me. So yeah, directing, writing, cast, all comes together pretty well. And then what I wanted to end on is just briefly talking about how I think it's interesting what Fassbender has chose to do with the movies he's choosing since he's come back from his auto racing break. He left the industry in 2019, started racing in 2020 till about 2022, and then his first film came out again in 2023. So before he left the industry, he was a very, very well-known Hollywood actor. He was sought after in a lot of roles. And I have here his last 3 roles before he left were Alien Covenant, The Snowman, and then X-Men Dark Phoenix. He was also a couple years before that. It's sort of maybe his 5th or 6th release before he left Hollywood. It was that Assassin's Creed movie that was received very poorly. But even on this list of the last 3 that he did, none of these movies were exactly like blowing people away. The most well received was Alien Covenant, and even that film, people are sort of like, well, I can see what Ridley Scott is going for, but maybe he doesn't hit the mark on a lot of things. I've seen the movie. I don't think it really hits in a lot of ways that I would have wanted an Alien movie to. I actually think since Alien Romulus has came out, I think Alien Romulus is probably even my second favorite Alien movie after the original. But Alien Covenant, to me, if Alien Covenant was going to be a success, it was going to be a success because it was a completed trilogy with a third movie, and it isn't, so it just feels a bit unfinished to me, which is harsh on the movie itself, but it was meant to be a trilogy quite clearly, and it just never happened. The Snowman, interesting concept. I love serial killer movies. I love crime movies. So I have seen it, but again, like this movie it's so boring. Like it's a terrible adaptation of what is a very well-known Scandinavian writer who has sold millions of copies across the world. So that one, again, very disappointing. And then his final one being X-Men Dark Phoenix, which was, I think, one of the most one of the worst received films of that year, if not the worst. And again, that was a major Hollywood production. I haven't seen it, but I've only heard bad things about it. And that was sort of in that X-Men run where, you had Apocalypse, that was also very well, very, very poorly received. You had the New Mutants, which was received very poorly as well. So I think you can see in those three films, Micheal Fassbender was a sought-after guy. But the films that he was sought after in probably weren't hitting it in the way that he wanted it to. If you're going to spend a lot of time doing Hollywood movies, a lot of these Hollywood movies will take up basically an entire year, and that's an entire year out of your career. So if you're doing that year on year, you want that one movie a year to hit. And if I'm looking at those three, I think the only one that was worth it was Alien Covenant, and even that is sort of like meh at best. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people are just kind of like, yeah, whatever, I don't really care about this. But then if you look at the 4 films that he's done since he came back in 2023, it's very interesting, and it suggests that there's been some sort of shift in his focus on what he wants to do now. Obviously, Micheal Fassbender is also older now. He is 46, I believe he is, so he would have left the industry when he was about 39. And in your 20s and your 30s, obviously you're going to be more interested, or a lot of people will be more interested in doing big Hollywood productions. They'll be interested in doing things that are going to get their name out there. They're going to be interested in their paycheck. And a lot of these actors, I think, will go one of two ways. Either they'll go Marvel as they get older, and they'll go, well, I'm collecting a paycheck because I never got a big paycheck. Or they'll go, like I think Fassbender has gone here, they'll go, actually, I'm going to go more indie, I'm going to focus on smaller productions, and I'm going to focus on more autoristic directors and more projects that I'm interested in personally and I'm passionate about. So he started off with The Killer, which is the David Fincher Netflix film. I love this film. Again, it's another one that is like quite simplistic, but I think it's really, really charming. It's one that has a ceiling, but it is a self-imposed ceiling. It sort of accepts where it is. It's not going to hit the same way that Fight Club hits, for example, or Seven, or Gone Girl, or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. But it is sort of like, it's very good, is what I would say. And it's sort of in that same realm to me as Black Bag, although I would say it probably is better than Black Bag. But that is purely because David Fincher is David Fincher. He is a premier director even now in the later stages of his career. And then he did Next Goal Wins, which is the Taika Waititi film. I haven't seen this, and I've heard it's not very well received, but I can't really speak to it myself. I can just say what I've heard about it, which is that it's not Taika Waititi's best. But again, this was a very small production that was based in New Zealand about, the New Zealand's first ever women's football team, or soccer. And again, just sort of indicates that he's not interested in these big budgets anymore. And then you had Kneecap, which is the first ever BAFTA nominated Irish language film. Again, this is one that was very highly rated. It is one that missed me by last year. Last year was very busy for me with my dissertation and stuff, but it is one that I'm interested in getting around to. I do want to see it. And as I understand it, I think that the director of that was a first-time director. I think it might have been the band themselves that directed it, the band Kneecap. and then Black Bag, like I says. So what's interesting to me is that I think Fassbender seems to be going under a bit of a resurgence right now, but it's not a. He hasn't had a movie yet, in my opinion, where it's like people have gone like, "Oh, he's really back. Like this is it. He's the guy now in art house cinema." But he is really trying to pursue, at least from these first four films, I think he is really trying to pursue these smaller projects, these authoristic visions that he's passionate about. You know, you don't do Next Go Wins and then Kneecap if you're just like in it for the paycheck. You're not in it for the Hollywood points. You're focusing on those films because you find them interesting yourself. And of course, Micheal Fassbender is Irish as well. So he is always going to be interested in Irish projects, films that showcase Ireland themselves. Even before he went on a break, he was doing films like that. He was doing, even before he went on his break, he was in a film called Trespass Against Us, which is set in Ireland, and it features Brendan Gleeson, who's also a very well-known Irish actor. He's very well known for doing projects in Ireland or set with Irish people about, you know, like the Irish sort of period dramas like Banshees of Inisherin, although that's more of a comedy film than a drama. So I think it's very interesting to see what Micheal Fassbender has done so far. I'm very interested to see what his next few projects are. I know he's already got 2 that are in post-production, but I haven't seen what those 2 films are about yet. But that will be my next thing because I'm interested in seeing what it is that he does next. But yeah, overall, Black Bag I think is very interesting. I think this is one that isn't getting enough love. It's not going to remake it, or it's not going to recoup its $50 million budget, much less its marketing budget included in that, which I imagine is somewhere of upward of 55 million, maybe around 60 million. But it is one that deserves some love, in my opinion. It has a ceiling, but it is, again, a self-imposed ceiling. It is not attempting to be an Oscar winner. It's not attempting to be a massive box office hit. It is attempting to be this small indie spy thriller that is enjoyable, that you can probably watch on Universal or Peacock, which will probably come out on soon, and Prime. You can watch it in 90 minutes on a Wednesday night and then forget about it in a week. And it's sort of within that realm, but it also will be one that I think I'll rewatch maybe once, maybe twice later on in the year, because it is that enjoyable to me, and it deserves more love than it's getting, unfortunately. But that is the way it goes. So, thank you. Bye.